you. Roll call, please.
Everyone's excused.
20 supervisors are present. Supervisors Gens, Rodriguez, and Nordigan are excused.
Citizens' comments. Any citizens' comments? Any citizens wishing to come in? If not, citizens' comments are closed. I have no announcements. Supervisor reports. Any committee chair reports? Seeing none, we'll move on to old business.
Old business ordinance, second reading, 2 required. Ordinance 12 from the Redistricting Committee, an ordinance to repeal and recreate Chapter 1 of the Municipal Code of Kenosha County and to adopt supervisory redistricting plan. Passed unanimously by the Redistricting Committee, Supervisors Boyd Frederick, Kubicki, Ron Frederick, Franco, and Palmaville voting aye.
Supervisor Frederick.
Move ordinance 12.
A motion by Supervisor Frederick, second by Supervisor Kubicki. Supervisor Frederick.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Supervisors, before you is the proposed final supervisory district for redistricting. It is nearly identical to the tentative map that was approved by this body in September. 4 small changes were made during the process in reconciling our map with the ward maps by the municipalities with Kenosha County. I believe you have that explanation of those changes on your desk. 3 of the 4 resulted in no population changes, and the 4th resulted in a move of 11 people, which means the effect was almost none. Additionally, 3 of the 4 were done to accommodate maps done by the municipalities, so they wouldn't have to make changes to their proposed ward maps. As I have mentioned before, this process usually takes 180 days from start to finish. We have been forced by the late arrival of census numbers to complete in just half that. I want to commend the professional staff for their efficient work in ensuring that we complete the approval of this map in time and have them in place for next year's spring election for the significant work that they did with the municipalities to make sure this process ran smoothly as possible under these circumstances.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, the page is stuck. There's a great deal that's been said about this map. People have attacked its legality and constantly said how bad it is, but in light on specifics and why they think that. This map follows traditional redistricting principles. It contains the districts are substantially equal in population, which is a legal line, not precisely equal, but substantially equal. The districts are more compact than the plan passed 10 years ago. On the question of continuity, the same number of districts are not contiguous on the map, and that's for the same reasons. It follows the population growth and a shift seen by the census data. It ensures respect for the incumbency by ensuring that every current member of the board has their own district. It finally maintains the integrity of municipal boundaries to the extent possible, particularly considering the city. The city contains 59% of the county's population, which comes out to 13.6 seats out of 23, rounding up to 14 and 9 county seats from the map 10 years ago. Does this plan you have before you address and accommodate every desire and request from the board? It does not. It does, however, meet the legal criteria for population deviation and districts as compact as possible and serves traditional redistricting principles. I urge supervisors to approve this map this evening so the county can continue to prepare for the spring elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As part of our discussion this evening, I would like the Corporation Counsel to report on the status of the lawsuit and his perspective on when we would get a decision and some of the other aspects of it. The other question I have, and I don't know if this is for the Corporation Council or the chair of the committee or some other staff person, but the substantial growth in Kenosha County has been outside of the city. I think the statistics that I recall was some 7% growth there and 1% or so in the city. Yet the numbers are the same. We have the same number of supervisors in the city as we do currently, and same with the county. How is it that the numbers did not change? In other words, why is not the city losing a supervisor and the county gaining a supervisor?
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. I'll speak first to your question regarding the suit. Suit was filed asking for a declaration that the map was unconstitutional. Further, a motion was filed as a part of that suit seeking a injunction to restrain this body from adopting it as the final map. The hearing on that restraining order request was held last week. The judge denied it. There are other motions pending, including a motion to dismiss in part. There is and again, I'm not handling the litigation directly. There's a hearing, I believe, in December to determine both, I think, that motion on the partial dismissal, as well as perhaps making a determination as to how the litigation will move forward. I can't speak on behalf of the plaintiffs in terms of what they may be intending and whether they wish to continue the suit beyond this point or not. I can only tell you that the judge did deny the motion for the restraining order, found that there was not good cause at this time to keep the body from proceeding with adopting this map. I don't know that he gave a lot of hints as to how he could rule going forward, but I don't know that we have a lot of options as a board other than to adopt a map and proceed with the process.
All right, what about the other issue of county, the numbers of city and county supervisors remaining the same? Who can answer that?
I would think that information would be the best people
Right.
to ask that question to. 'Cause they-
Good evening, Scott Schutze from the Division of Land Information. Supervisor Rose, the answer to your question is going into this process, we had discussions with the redistricting committee, and one of the core questions we asked at the beginning of that process was how many supervisors were we modeling throughout the county, and we were told to stick with 23 from the beginning of that process, and that's why that did not change.
So, just kind of following that up, just assume only the board could change from 23 to some other number, but why wouldn't, for example, if there's this large growth in the county, with the county ending up with more supervisors, at least one more supervisor than they have, city less? That's the part I don't quite understand.
While there was changes in population in certain areas of the county, there wasn't enough to change the number that would be represented in the county versus the city.
And what would that number be?
I don't recall the number off the top of my head, but it would have to be at, I believe, somewhere around 7,500.
More population in general all over the county than current?
There's a number of calculations that would have to go into that, but it would have to be much more significant than what was seen, plus the decision going in that the number of districts were to change.
So, in other words, if we decided that there should have been 24, 25, then those numbers, then the county would have had one or more additions. Is that what you're saying?
Potentially so, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all, thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair to Scott, Before I ask you a question, many of you know I'm not happy with this map, specifically as it pertains to District 17. So Scott, what was wrong with District 17 that it had to be chopped up the way it is? The number had to be changed. It seemed to me like it was perfectly intact. Population maybe was a little large, maybe need to slice a little bit off, that's about it. So can you explain why it looks like sort of like a fish hook now as opposed to the nice compact area that it once was?
Some of the largest population change in the county was in fact in Pleasant Prairie.
I realize that.
And throughout the course of drawing the tentative supervisory districts, there are cases where we have to group more rural areas with more urban areas. And what you see is on the west side of Pleasant Prairie, we had to grab from somewhere, and it ended up being the south portion of Bristol, which is relatively lightly populated, as opposed to what's in the northwest corner of Pleasant Prairie.
Okay, but wasn't District 18 already encompassing Bristol and Pleasant Prairie? It was, right? Why was there a need to almost reverse it and then change the number?
Like I mentioned in our redistricting committee meetings, we generally started at the southeast corner of the county, and we worked our way westward. And as we worked around, that's how the numbers dragged the districts. And when we did that, 17 and 18 were essentially flipped. We personally didn't view the changing of the numbers as a significant issue. And that's the way that we had created it.
I realize that's how you created it. Okay, thank you. To the chair, can you advise why you chose tonight for this meeting as opposed to when it was going to originally be on Thursday? Why did you switch the day? No, my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe someone else can speak, I thought it was supposed to be Thursday, and then at the last meeting you said it was
No.
tonight.
No, it was never Thursday, it was always tonight,
Okay, and why tonight? Just curious.
to keep things moving.
Wouldn't it have been faster to have it on Thursday?
Faster?
Well, yeah,
Well, we weren't
because,
gonna have a
time
meeting.
seems to be of the essence. Why didn't we have it on Thursday?
Go ahead.
Supervisor Rumble, my understanding is, yes, the original notice was that it was going to be Thursday of last week. When the suit was filed and we didn't know if we were going to have a decision yet, a determination was made to hold off because we didn't know if we were going to be able to proceed. We'd set that date back in like September.
The Thursday date, back in September.
Long before maybe
Correct.
in August, long before the lawsuit was filed. We didn't know if we were going to have a decision yet, so we didn't know if there was the ability to proceed Thursday night. This was the first time that we could schedule it following having the decision and adding it, number one. Number two, we knew that there was already a committee meeting going to be scheduled for this evening, so we knew that there was already some participation from the board that was going to be available and able to meet tonight.
Okay, so you're saying it's just a coincidence that it happens to fall on the same night of a school board meeting and the exact same time when we know there's not going to be any citizens here to voice an opinion about this map. That has nothing to do with it, correct?
I'm not aware of anyone scheduling that one.
Okay, just, it seems kind of fishy to me, just like some of this seems fishy to me, all right?
Personally, I didn't know the school board was meeting tonight anyway, myself.
You were told last meeting,
Yeah.
okay?
No, he
It
didn't
was
say
brought
why-
up.
He didn't say why he was not going to be here.
Yes, he did.
Okay.
He actually
I didn't
did,
hear him
okay?
say that.
So
Okay.
obviously, I'm not supporting this, and I suggest you don't either, the rest of you, and we send it back, we get it fixed, we do some of this right, and then we can move on it. I doubt if that's going to happen. Again, I'm not happy, and I think I'm going to stop talking before I say something I'm going to regret, because I think something else is going on here, so thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Noodle.
Oh, thank you. First of all, let me just say what the Corporation Council said, and I don't know any better words to say, but it's all a bunch of crap. But I'll get back to Corporation Council later. I have a couple questions for Scott. I know we talked many times. I tried to go through all the tapes of all the meetings, but I could not find one tape in there. It's not there. Does anybody know where the tape is or what happened to it? I heard that it's not there anymore, it's misplaced. Or maybe I did not know how to find, but maybe I can give you a call tomorrow or something and we can try to figure that out. But I just wanted to make sure that this meeting tonight, it's gonna stay on tape and it's not gonna disappear. The question that I have for Scott is, I believe, but I'm getting old, I might be wrong. You said the main reason that deviation was 12.6 or something like that was because your main concern was to keep all the incumbents separate, not against each other. Am I right on that? I mean, it's a simple question.
I don't know. I believe the main concern we had was maintaining the unity of political subdivisions. Now, throughout the process, all of the principles of redistricting were used, and certainly that would be one of them.
I believe that there is only so much I can say because this is still in litigation. We're kind of preparing for trial, and I don't know how much I can say it. However, I know, going back to what one of the comments that was made before, that the judge ruled against it. The judge ruled against the injunction. The reason being is that there is not enough time, and if we don't to change anything, and we keep what we had for the last 10 years, that will give us 26%, and he took the less of the two evils, the 12.6%, for 1 year, and eventually it can be done later. So this part, I gotta give credit to Corporation Council, because one of my questions was before, what happens if we go to court and we don't get it done? I mean, what's gonna happen? And his question was, by the time he goes through the court system, it's gonna be too late. So basically, hey, let's postpone it, let's file. Then with the attorneys, it was very defendable case. We ended up hiring 2 of the highest paid attorneys in the state. I'm not sure what the bill is gonna be, but we had 2 of the highest paid attorneys in the state. I know Corporation Council was at the last, whatever you wanna call it, with the judge, but of course he didn't say one word. And if I recall it correct, when you were asked, because the 12.6, it could be legal if you try to do a bunch of other things in there. And you say your main concern was to keep the supervisor not against each other. Correct? And I'm talking about the, whatever the date was of the, what should we call it? It was not the hearing with the judge.
Supervisor Nudo, the deviation on the plan is 12.16%. My main concern throughout the entire process is that we take into account all of the principles of redistricting. It's not a very easy thing to do. We could come up with 100 plans here, and we could point at every single one of them for not being correct. I have done the best I could have done throughout this entire process. This is not a perfect process.
I understand that maybe you tried to do the perfect way based on what you were told to do it, just to get it in the way that some of the people wanted, and that was it. Now, I'll get back to that in a minute. Going back, I believe Corporation Counsel said that there is another motion or hearing to dismiss it. It's not to dismiss the case. The hearing to do it the next time is to dismiss me as a plaintiff. I believe that's a game that was played just to buy time before. So we could postpone it until, just like the judge said it, 12.6 or 12.16, it's better than 26%. So I guess you accomplish your goal. That's what I said before. You guys said we got the votes, pretty much. We can do any darn thing we wanted. But don't forget, we got the people behind us. And we're not here trying to circumvent the legality or just trying to play games to win when we go against the people in the county. Why was the motion made to dismiss me? Because they say I'm benefiting in the way it is, so therefore I should keep my mouth shut. No, I'm talking for all the people in the county. I'm talking for all the supervisors that got screwed. I'm talking because this map was done to benefit some of the supervisors at the expenses of others. That's completely wrong. And if we vote on this tonight, we did it already. We can remedy what we did. It's a complete shame. Shame on us. Just like tonight, in the committee meeting that we had downstairs, I was complaining about something. There is nothing what they're doing. It's what we have on the bylaws or on the budget resolution. But shame on us for not changing it. And that's what I say downstairs. I was going to bring it up at the last meeting, but somehow we were unable to talk. $302 million budget, and we could only talk on one thing. Why? Because I wanted to do things that it's, I will not say illegal, but we should be ashamed to do that. And if we do this tonight, if we vote for this tonight, really, I don't know what the heck to say. I came here when I was 17 years old. Pretty much over in Italy, where I was living, especially in the region where I was, either you did what they told you to do it, or you would go pretty much without food or without anything, no jobs or anything. When I came here, I was so darn happy to be in a country where our voice could be heard. If you wanted to work, you could do you could be just as good as anybody else. When I first started on this county board, it was a county board. We could disagree, but still be social, still be civil about it. But right now, no. We don't have any leadership. Let's be ashamed of it. And there is a time tonight we can correct that. So I urge everybody, come to your sense and vote against this shame. Thank you.
Supervisor Belsky.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to point out, and I don't know if it's disappointment or not, I'm District 4. I'm on the very north side of Kenosha, and I have my neighbors directly across the street, who I get along very well with, are in the town of Summers. Nothing against Supervisor Mauer, but I would have liked to have the town of Summers within my district, because all of these people are my neighbors. And if you look at District 4, I have the greatest deviation percentage of minus 6.24%. I lost 459 residents. So if you look at District 21, with the highest number population of 7,741, and my district population of 6,895, that's a deviation of 894 people. And while I'm sorry I didn't have the opportunity to come to the redistricting meetings because of back issues, I would have liked to have seen District 4 encompass the town of Summers. That will be eventually, I believe in 2035, become part of the city of Kenosha. If you look at
supervisory districts 18, 17, and 16. I'm sorry, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. They all contain different townships and villages. 18 has the village of Pleasant Prairie and the village of Bristol, and so on. I just don't see why my district couldn't include the town of Summers and my immediate neighbors. So I just want to point out that, again, my district has the greatest deviation of minus 6.24%. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
It's mic on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think part of my dissatisfaction with not necessarily the process, but the map I'm looking at, starts out with Supervisor Rose's comments. And that is indeed, if we have a larger population shift towards western portion of the county, one of two things, or both, perhaps should happen. And that would be either the city gives up a seat and the county has a large representation, or we add an additional county board supervisor to represent the population growth that's happening in the western portion of our county. Seems relatively straightforward and relatively obvious. In my own particular district, District 1, I have two population centers at the north and the south end of my particular district. One is Harbor Park, the other is Carthage. So I'm taking a look at this map, and for whatever reason, both of those have been done away with, and now they're no longer part of the district. So it's just kind of, I think, arbitrary, somewhat capricious, and I don't support it. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Supervisor Palmerville.
Through the chair to Scott, could you explain just a little bit more about those few principles that you used to draw the maps? For those of us who were in the map, meetings, it was very helpful, and maybe you could just recap those real quick for us. Thank you.
Hold on.
There's a number of principles related to redistricting. Among them are the unity of political subdivisions. That's meaning a political district does not cross a municipal boundary. The unity of common areas or areas of common interest. That is where you try to group people together that have similar mindsets or similar characteristics so that they may elect someone that has a, that's more representative of their feelings and thoughts. Additionally, you have the maintaining the incumbents districts, and that is something that was done on Plan C. That's before you tonight. And then you have compactness, trying to keep them as compact as possible. And then you have contiguity, which is maintaining all portions of the district so that there's not islands. And those are the primary principles. It's difficult to create a map that takes all of those into consideration. And when you make modifications for one principle of redistricting, it's like a fabric. You end up pulling some of the other principles away, and it's difficult. My coworker and I have spent an enormous amount of hours over the course of the last 3 months. I don't want to tell you how many hours a week we put into this process, but it's been well over 60 hours a week since that time. There is no such thing as a perfect map when it comes to redistricting. Not in Kenosha County, not in Milwaukee County, not anywhere else. But we have worked our tails off to give you something here. It's not perfect, And we could change it today to something else, and we'll still have these arguments. I'm proud of the work we put into this. We put our hearts into it, but I must tell you, it has not been a pleasurable experience. Not at all. But I'm proud of what we have put before you, and I believe in it.
Supervisor Rose?
To the Corporation Council, what's the deadline for the board to adopt something?
It's hard to say, Supervisor Rose, what a hard and fast deadline is. The notice for the spring election has to run in the paper 1 week before papers can be taken out, nomination papers. That means November 23rd. When you work backwards from that in terms of the lead time that the clerk's office needs in order to get it to the newspaper to ensure that it will be run, I believe that pushes it back to about the 18th. If you factor in the time that the state needs at the WEC to make sure that they've got all the information so they can start entering what they need, you just keep on pushing it back further. I can only tell you that the WCA's recommended guideline was that we get it finished up by no later than the 15th of November, and again, that really was their recommendation of getting it done absolutely by that date to make sure that all the other steps could be followed and completed in time to make sure the elections can proceed.
The other question is, if we increase the number of supervisors to 24, does that then recognize the population growth outside of the city or not? Scott?
If we were to go back to the drawing board and model a supervisory district plan with 24 districts, it would take into account all population growth that has been reflected on the 2020 census.
So are we too late to do that, Corporation Council, or not?
I don't want to speak for the map drawers. I will tell you that the map that is before you has been utilized by all of the municipalities in the county to draw their ward maps. If we were to go back to the drawing board, start over again with a new map, adding an additional seat, I can only assume it would have a significant impact on what these districts look like and would therefore have a significant cascading impact on the maps that all of the other municipalities have drawn in reliance on the map that's in front of you.
I guess the one thing I'm disappointed about, personally, I like the way my own district is shaped, but I don't think that the plan really recognizes the growth outside of the city, and I think we're missing the mark when we don't recognize that growth. That's all.
Supervisor Decker?
Thank you. I missed the first redistricting meeting, but I attended all the other ones, and they were just ridiculous. The lies that were told about, for number one, that 5 of us county board supervisors in District 23, 22, 21, 20, and 19 all lived in a straight line, and that's why Supervisor Nordigan and I were paired together, when the 5 of us do not live in a straight line. They couldn't be bothered to put the names of the supervisors on the maps because they told us that they didn't actually look at where all of us lived when they drew the supervisory lines. But amazingly, somehow, 5 county board supervisors in the city are within about 2 blocks of a line. Convenient. It's amazing how they were able to draw at least 5 county board supervisors in the city within 2 blocks of the district lines, but couldn't draw Supervisor Norgan and myself, which we live about 8 miles apart in separate districts. Mr. Shusey says that he paid attention to the fact that all the supervisors were put in separate districts. But he forgets to tell you that the first two maps he didn't, that he had Supervisor Nordigan and myself together. It was only then that after much arguing that the committee, made up of all Democrats instead of being a bipartisan committee, told Mr. Schutze to separate Supervisor Nordigan and myself. But Mr. Schutze didn't give us two maps to choose from then. He just gave us one. So really, we didn't have a choice in which map to choose.
Made up of all Democrats
We were given
instead
one
of being
map.
a bipartisan
So
committee.
the administration drew the maps that the County Board of Supervisors, the legislative branch, should have drawn. Another important thing to notice is, like Supervisor Wambold said, Districts 18 and 17 pretty much flip-flopped and didn't keep their boundary lines close to what they were currently. That's one of the things that should be watched for, is that you don't change district lines too much. Now, I believe the reasons why the numbers were changed was so people wouldn't notice. They would just say, well, it's pretty close, not realizing, because there's no supervisors named on the maps, that the supervisors actually representing those districts are completely different. And we had one person come in and say that, well, 20 years ago, District 17 ran north and south. Well, 20 years ago, we had 28 supervisors. You cannot take a map with 28 supervisors and do it down to 23 and consider those the same. They're completely different maps. District 6 and 1, very different. There's no reason, in my opinion, why those districts changed so much. Obviously, Supervisor Grady is not happy with District 1. Supervisor Belsky is not happy with her district because she'd like to have her neighbors in her district. I know I'm happy that my district is relatively the same, so I really don't have anything to complain about for my district itself. But as a county as a whole, the map is awful. When you have so many supervisors up not happy with the map, something is wrong with the map. 10 years ago, I was on the redistricting committee with Supervisor O'Day, Supervisor Clark, Supervisor Eckerness, and Supervisor Bill Michaels. There was no complaints about the maps, and if there were, we had some minor changes, and those were made by some supervisors that requested them. One of them, I believe, was to try to ensure that Supervisor Gabe Nudo didn't win election, because at that time he wasn't on the board. It was a clear case of gerrymandering, but it happened. To Supervisor Rose's point, I did the math. With 14 supervisors in the city and 9 in the county, the deviation between the city districts is over 200 each district. That the city has 200 less each district than the county does. There is a base deviation of over 7% that the city is overrepresented and the county is underrepresented. That's because if you take out and make it 22 supervisors, which was never discussed about being 22 supervisors. It was never said, hey, 22 supervisors is actually better mathematically, because with 23, as in 14 and 9, it's over a couple hundred deviation. 22 supervisors, where it's 13 and 9, the deviation is 6 people each district, 6. So it's obvious that the city has one too many supervisors. And that was hidden, so that way the city obviously gets one more supervisor for partisan reasons. There's many reasons to not support this map, and I just laid out a whole bunch. So for the chair of the redistricting committee to say that there's no substantial reasons, I just explained them to you, and I've explained them numerous times to different people, including the news media and people that were sitting behind us. They knew the same reasons also. So for the chair of the committee to say that, he's being disingenuous. When a map can get passed 10 years ago unanimously, and we have so many against the map here, something's wrong with the map. It's a good thing that state statutes allow us to redraw a map within the 10 years of the census. And we can also actually change the number of supervisors at one time between the 10 years of the census. So remember that in the future.
Thank you. Supervisor Noodle.
Thank you. I said before, I get back to Scott, and then I just start talking and I forgot about it anyway. But some of the question I wanted to ask him, Supervisor Decker asked them. I just want to say, one of these comments that he made after that, he said that it was a very, I believe, unpleasant time to do this redistrict and spend many hours. I wish I could say I feel sorry for it, but I don't, because it was a lot more unpleasant for me. And I spent many more hours than you did, and I spent a lot more money trying to fix what we're trying to screw up. Another thing, I wasn't going to say anything about my district. My district had lost probably about 60% of my district, where they sent me really whatever they did, and part of my district, they split it to two other supervisors, which they give me part of what he had before, and they give him a part of mine. Why is that? It's the same supervisor that asked to change the maps 10 years ago. So I would not be in his district, and I would run against maybe somebody else. I would not run them. Now maybe he had more power. He was the chairman of the district, and he liked maybe my area or whatever. So that's all I have to say right now. But please, please, come to your senses and vote no. Do something right.
Supervisor Franco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't like my district either. There's a good chunk of it that was taken out that I have to share with Supervisor Nudo. I bet you if we went around the horn here and asked every single supervisor, there was some adjustment or some change that was done. And if we were asked, do we like it, do we don't like it, I bet you many of us would say we don't like it. Now, I grant that for some supervisors, there were bigger adjustments to their district than others. And I don't disagree that there might be some legitimate complaints this evening. But one of the things that I have to say is that when we had these meetings, the only objections that this committee heard was Supervisor Decker's complaint and Nordigan that they were in the same district. We also heard a general complaint by Supervisor Nudo that we were moving too fast. And Supervisor Rose mentioned, could we adjust the districts to fit the county wards? The first one, Supervisor Decker's complaint, I recognized as a legitimate complaint, a legitimate objection. In fact, I was the one who brought up the motion to have Mr. Schutze redraw the maps. The assumption was that we would be redrawing a third map, so Supervisor Nordigan and Supervisor Decker would not be in the same district. I totally agree. That was not respecting incumbency. We didn't have to do that, but I thought it was the right thing to do. As far as Supervisor Nudo's objection, moving too fast, I mean, that was a generic thing. We didn't have a whole lot of time. We were working on less time, and I don't know, maybe we were working fast, but we had to make a decision. And Supervisor Rose's recommendation was not accepted by the committee, largely because it wouldn't work. It used to be that the city wards and the counties were the same, but it wouldn't work. The other thing, too, is I think we're also forgetting that the numbers are getting, there are population shifts, and everyone's district is going to get a little bigger, a little smaller. Mine was a 7% increase, so mine got smaller at the east end in Whitecaps. There was a big chunk that was taken out. As again, do I like that? No, I don't. But the problem is, if we leave this up to every individual person, to say whether they like the way their district is now newly redrawn, we'll never get this done. And that's what I'm concerned about. Several objections were made up on this floor, but they weren't made in committee. The only 2 or 3 that I mentioned were those. And now here we are on the floor after several committee meetings. We passed it, and now all of a sudden, legitimate as they may be, everyone is coming up with their own objections to the map. As I said, I could make one right now too. Now, we could try to come up with a mythical, perfect map that doesn't exist, right? And we'll be here till doomsday, or we can move ahead on the best map that we have available. The court has ruled the major argument, and I happened to listen to that decision, was that right now, the deviation rate, or the original deviation rate of our present maps is 26%. I thought that was an interesting argument that was brought up by the defense. If we're going to say that a 12.16 deviation is unconstitutional, but yet a 26% deviation isn't, where's the logic in that? Of course, the judge immediately recognized that it made no sense. So, I hear you, I hear the arguments, but none of this was brought up when we could have done something about it in the committee. But now all of a sudden we're bringing this all up last minute, we're supposed to vote on this, and the assumption is we need to send this back or whatever. I can't do that. So I'll be supporting these maps. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me, one other thing. Sorry, Mr. Chair, can I add something?
Go ahead.
Thank you.
No.
One other thing. I keep reflecting on the fact that, it's like I ask myself, why am I not happy with my district as it's drawn? And the thing that comes into my mind is, well, I'm going to have new constituents, and maybe some of the old constituents, and I can think of several that are not in my newly drawn district. I think, darn, and I suppose it's common sense. I would have preferred having my old constituents. But let's think about it. What's wrong with having new constituents? I mean, this is not at the state or federal level where, even though we all know partisanship exists everywhere, but we're not running as Democrats or Republicans. We can get new constituents, and I have a lot of people in my district who are Republicans and independents who voted for me. So I don't care, really. I think it's inconvenient, but let's face it, if we get new constituents, so what? So we'll have to deal with them. Anyway, that's the thought that occurred to me when I was trying to figure out and try to understand where people are coming from and why they're upset about their new maps. I think we forget that. So if we get new constituents, that's the name of the game every 10 years. You're not going to have the same group of people every 10 years, especially with the rate of growth that we have. That's it. I'm done.
Thank you. Supervisor Rose?
Let me just preface my remarks by saying I do like my shape of my district. It's more compact. It's, I think, more homogeneous, if that's a factor. So I'm not criticizing what the committee did with respect to mine, but I don't think that the redistricting reflects, and I said this before and I'll say it again, and I said it to a number of people privately, the growth outside of the city. I mean, that's what we're always promoting here as a county to the people we represent, to people who move here, to companies that may be moving here, the growth outside of the city, but we don't recognize it in this map. That concerns me. Now, maybe that would have required different numbers. Maybe we would have had to increase or even decrease the number of supervisors. Probably increase would have been more palatable than decreasing. What happened here, I think, is that we began to really scrutinize this map and think about all of the various arguments when we found that 2 supervisors in the county were running against each other. That had not happened before. It didn't look right, it didn't smell right, and then people begin to dig and take a look at, well, what are the other things here? Supervisor Wemble doesn't like his district and shape of it, and he lives out in the county. This looked like too much partisan politics being played, which had not been played 10 years ago. There wasn't a lot of dissension. There wasn't dissension, as I recall, in the county board when that other plan was voted on, but there's a lot of dissension now. I strongly believe that the recognition ought to be given to the growth that we have seen outside of the city. And I say maybe that requires another supervisor or 2. We reduced the board in the past for other reasons. And we don't have to be wedded to that theory that was propounded at the time. Times change. Maybe we needed to increase the number of supervisors to accommodate that growth. Or you reduce the number of supervisors as the flip side so that everybody represents more people, but that doesn't sound as politically feasible. So one thing I'm concerned about here is if we vote this down this evening, do we have a commitment here from the committee that they will respond to some of these arguments and come back very quickly before the deadlines? This is the 8th. We're talking about the 22nd or 23rd. Will we have a commitment from the county clerk's office to get out the proper notices? Will we increase or decrease the number of supervisors here? We've got to have that commitment if we're going to vote that down. And I need to have an answer on that before we decide to vote, because if we don't have that commitment, then it's up to the courts and, we'll have to live with the results. And each side thinks they're going to win, and who knows, and what will be the result if it is thrown out. And now we have a redistricting map that we are electing supervisors based on what? The old one? Is that better? I think that probably would be the result. And is that really fair to our constituents? So if we're going to vote this down and send it back, taking into account the criticisms that we've heard this evening, those people on the committee, the chairman, the staff, et cetera, committed to taking these points into account, coming back with something different so that we can be supportive of it. I think it's important that we have a unified coalition here, not just a majority, but a real coalition of support, because this is one of the most important things you do. One person, one vote. That's what this is all about. We're trying to increase the number, we say at least, we're trying to increase the number of people who participate in government, who have confidence in government, and this is the way to do it. I want to know if we have that commitment from those who are involved at the committee level. Are you going to do this? Or are you just going to come back with the same thing and a week later we're here doing the same thing with the same vote? Thank you.
Supervisor Rose, when it was decreased to 23, I was not even on the board yet, but it had to go through committee, it had to go through the board, and there's no time for that to be done before the 23rd. To get, and then have to do everything that the other municipalities have to do it, there's not enough time on the clock.
Okay?
I mean, is that the word of the committee, Mr. Chair? I know I heard what you said, but is that the,
I'll have to poll each committee member then.
Supervisor Rose, I'd just like to clarify that I need to be able to send the type A notice to the newspaper by November 18th at the very latest in order to meet state statute.
Okay, Terry? Yes. Okay. All right. I believe it's Supervisor Grady's next.
Some, I'll move to call the question.
Moved and seconded to call the question. Take a roll call vote. I can't see it even with my glasses. No. Let us.
You're voting on to call the question, but Michelle is setting it up. It's not up there yet.
Pointing out some information. No, I would just like to point out some information that Supervisor Boyd Frederick was on the county board when we reduced the size from 28 to 23, because I was on the county board, and he and I got elected at the same time. So he is incorrect in his information.
They voted on it, was beforehand, when we reduced it.
No, we voted on it in 2010. Yes, we did.
Ready, Michelle? We're not ready yet, just a moment. Okay, ready to vote.
This is on the motion to end debate, correct?
This is on the motion, call the question to end debate.
Good point.
The vote is 16 yes, 4 no. Passes by 2/3 vote.
Have a roll call vote.
We need a moment, just a minute.
Hold on.
So the vote is on ordinance 12 from the redistricting committee, an ordinance to repeal and recreate chapter 1 of the municipal code of Kenosha County and to adopt supervisory redistricting plan. Yep.
So there's 3 absent, there's 20 supervisors. If it's a tie, everyone has.
Ordinance 12 passes, majority vote, 12 yes, 8 no. Claims 19, Tina Pavlich vehicle damage. The approval of the minutes of the,
Refer to Corporation
sorry.
Council.
approval of the minutes of the county board meeting held November 2nd, 2021 by Supervisor Grady.
Move to approve.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion to adjourn? Moved and seconded, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.